curious if you've thought about this before.
I have. This is the tail emission conversation, really. Crypto is not about money. Yeah, that's the hot take. Money's not the first or second or probably even third most interesting thing about crypto. The interesting part is social coordination and scaling social coordination. It just so happens that money was the first logical way to do that on this substrate. But the whole point is, I think we will see more of crypto denominated in BTC. There are many assets that people consider money in crypto, usually the gas token of your popular networks, and I don't think they're money.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Bitcoin Economy Podcast. This week, we have a very special episode with our guest, Red, who is one of the foremost experts on everything Bitcoin infrastructure and Bitcoin Layer 2s. I had a lot of fun in this podcast. We learned about incentive systems, what's happening with the Bitcoin ecosystem, and what to anticipate going forward. So, without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy. What is it in crypto that you find the most interesting that other people get wrong?
Heavy hitter to kick it off.
Yeah.
Crypto is not about money. Yeah, that's the hot take. Like, money's not the first or second or probably even third most interesting thing about crypto. The interesting part is social coordination and scaling social coordination. It just so happens that money was the first logical way to do that on this substrate. But the whole point is, you can only really form a meaningful relationship with so many people. There's a psychological concept there, like the Dunbar number. That's why pure democracy doesn't really scale. We have representatives and we start, putting people in places that vote for you. It's, these systems get messy, they get opaque. But with crypto, when you use mathematical trust, that is kind of the game changer. Like, that's what all of this is about. Like, money makes sense is the first thing that would take off, but it's not the primitive itself.
Okay, wait. We got to back up. What is the Dunbar method?
The Dunbar number is like a concept in psychology where you can really only have a relationship meaningfully with, like 150, 200 people. And that is probably some evolutionary reason in terms of sizes of groups we lived in, but you weren't supposed to know a million people. The reach of the internet, we didn't really evolve alongside that. I think it's too much for us. And I think living in groups of the size that we live in, countries of hundreds of millions or billions of people, you can't know all these people. You don't have the bandwidth to, keep up with all of them or even know what any of them are thinking. That's why we have representative governments. That's why people don't have 10,000 people come to their wedding, every person you've ever met. That number sits around like 150 for many of those. Like, this number comes up often, and past that, it doesn't really scale. That's also what I learned with DAOs when I first got into crypto. I'm like, this does not work once you get past a certain amount of people. You got to start delegating. And I think crypto is the tool that lets us more efficiently scale past those numbers and have transparent systems past that size and systems that work past that size.
Okay, so crypto, it started off with money. That was the most logical choice for this coordination system. But now what you're saying is that it can expand past that. So it can do more with social coordination as well. And doing it within these groups. So how does that work? And what's maybe an example of this where you're seeing it actually play out?
Yeah, well, money being a form of social coordination, how do we all agree on a medium through which to exchange things? What is valuable? Voting is one very interesting one. And crypto being a sandbox, you get to see cool forms of voting. You get to see quadratic voting on Gitcoin. Like, we do linear voting in elections. I'm one man, I have one vote. Or, financial ones, like $1 is one vote. But Gitcoin has this quadratic method. So if 10 people donate $10 each to your project, or if one person donates 100 to mine, you are going to get much more funding from the Gitcoin pot because 10 people voted. It doesn't matter. It's the same amount of money to each of us. So you can try out all these other systems. If you look at property rights, we've got a pretty straightforward system in the States, and most places use similar systems. But what if you wanted to try out harburger taxes? Like
Mm.
how do you test out that idea in the real world? You can like overthrow a government and implement it. Not very easy. You can
I hope that
try to
doesn't
do
happen.
it the legislative way. You're not going to get there. So like Harburger taxes, I think that's how the original monopoly was made. Like we're going to try out this tax system. No one plays it that way.
Mm.
But there are projects that do that. Like GeoWeb was doing Harburger taxes, and um, there's an Orb project that did Harburger taxes, and like that's pretty cool. How do you try out a new system, a new orientation of coordinating around something we know, but with real money and real people, and do it fast, be able to tear it down, spin it back up, and have it transparent, have the trust involved that the people running this. I'm not just putting my faith in them. I can see the rules are ingrained on chain.
So, okay, that's super cool. So basically, we've been in the Stone Age, is what I'm hearing. We've been doing these like linear systems, and now for the first time ever with crypto, we are able to experiment with coordinated trust, and we're able to try a bunch of different things and see how we can get people all acting in the same way, incentivized in the same way, to get X, Y, or Z desired outcome. That's pretty cool.
That's why I work in crypto. Finance is not very interesting to me. I don't think it's supposed to be, but yeah, finance is like, eh. There are cooler things.
So, but crypto at least right now really does tie into finance, right? There's a lot of financial incentives that drive the ecosystem, even with tokens just in general, right? It's like you are contributing to a project in some sense, and then you're rewarded with an airdrop, which makes you more incentivized to do marketing for the project or X, Y, and Z. But fundamentally, it comes down to financial incentive, uh, which comes down to probably like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like ultimately, you're
Yeah.
doing stuff in self interest. So maybe can you tell me like an example of sort of where you've seen this stuff really work well? Maybe with some DAOs or maybe across some projects where coordination has really come together.
We definitely don't have any examples as good as money. um, and having a good money is an effective tool to build really any other system. So
Mm,
there are Web 2 examples you can pull. Look at Tor. How do you get people to run Tor? Like the Onion router, and
yeah.
it's a mixer for your internet traffic. They do it out of the goodwill of their hearts, or they do it because they want to collect data of who is using and sending information over the Tor network. There's not
Hmm.
really a good incentive system. You can't really pay people for it because now the lowest, like the weakest link of anonymity is the payment system. So if you have a decentralized, or better yet, private payment system, you can now incentivize other systems. Like you said, how do you get people involved in new projects, even if they're financial projects? You kind of have to pay them. Like, how do you get people to do surveys? Like, ask any friend in market research. You have to pay them, or they're not going to take the survey.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why I said money's a logical first step. But then you can do other things like if, we want like a decentralized VPN service, like a
Mm.
mixnet, something like NIM. It's like, well, you kind of need money involved because you have to incentivize people to play the game, but uh, you have a area of wider area of tools you can build, or it you have a more flexible system in which you can build those tools or build those products, whether it's just relaying information, whether it's compute, things like AWS. Like another way to look at it is Bitcoin is deep in money, and there are all these other
Mm.
deep in things we can build.
So tell me about Bitcoin.
Bitcoin. Bitcoin kicked it all off. It is your censorship resistant money. It is the most secure database on the planet.
Mm.
If you want persistence of your uh, wizard JPEG or any other information, it's a database where you can append and you can write, and it's not going anywhere. Supposed to be, or intentionally uh, made for financial transactions, but you could put a
Yep.
lot more on there. But it is decentralized physical infrastructure for money.
Why did Bitcoin work so well? I mean, now hundreds of millions of people have used it. Everyone in the world knows about it. Like, why did this work? Did Satoshi just design it perfectly from the onset, or is there's something else like fundamental to humans that like made this really kick off?
When Bitcoin came out, I was in like middle school, so not a first-hand account of all of this here. The way I understand it is
Hmm.
it is something people were used to. If you think of fiat currencies before they got off the gold standard, you have most currencies acting as gold with similar financial properties to Bitcoin in that sense. And then a very understandable next step is, well, I want to be able to mess with the supply a little. I want to be able to profit off a little bit, have a little bit more control over this gold. So I'm going to make my own version of gold. I'm going to make the US dollar and it's backed by gold. And that would, if Sol was backed by BTC, that would be equivalent to like the fiat gold relationship prior to coming off the gold standard. Uh, but once the dollar is off the gold standard, that kind of creates the need for we want a money that is more like the money that everyone before us used. And I
Hmm.
think there are fundamental framework points of I want to own what's mine. I don't want it debased. This needs to hold its value over time. This needs to be able to be transported. This needs certain properties of money that we maybe don't have from fiat currencies. And then you have the perfect storm. Narratives are transient. '08 financial crisis was the
Yeah.
narrative that gives you a product, Bitcoin. And then you have plenty of other narratives since then that, they're all just flavor of the day, but they help it grow. The important part is Bitcoin was not based on any of those narratives. It was based on more universal human desires. So, the narratives help pump it and they help put some wind behind the sails, but it doesn't die when the narrative's gone.
Suspect timing. Maybe Satoshi, was pulling the global financial crisis. But no, I, I agree. I think one thing that's super interesting with Bitcoin, and one thing that we're working on is like how do you actually make Bitcoin a reserve currency? So uh, one thing that's a bit of a challenge right now is that Bitcoin is inherently deflationary. So it increases in value relative to the dollar. There's no need to spend it, or there's no incentive to spend it. You don't want to spend it. You want to accumulate as much Bitcoin as you can get. Uh, and I'm wondering if that also in and of itself uh, is a risk to Bitcoin, or is that just going to be solved by ultimately the supply of Bitcoin being released, and then there'll be a bit more stability in price. I'm curious if you've thought about this before.
I have. This is the tail emission conversation, really.
Okay. Yeah, tell me about the tail emission.
Well, the tail emission idea for anyone unfamiliar is we have a fixed supply, right? What if we had an asset that always, inflated to a certain degree just for the sake of a security budget, really? Like, how do we keep paying miners? How do we keep its security robust? And if it's not through fees, you have to be incentivizing miners some way or another. So what if we just had a tail emission? Many tokens do this. It does fight against, in my opinion, the core principles of Bitcoin. I
Hmm.
think there are some fun ideas from the BIP360 team, like the quantum focused team of, hey, what do we do with all Satoshi's coins so we make sure quantum computers don't get them? We could kick
Hmm.
the tail emission conversation can way down the road if we say, well, let's just use those coins for paying miners for a while. And then we won't have to worry about this for another 100 years.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, not that it's coming up tomorrow. I don't think inflating past 21 million is the solution there. So yeah, it does create this incentive where why would I spend my money? It's going to be worth more tomorrow than it is today.
What are the biggest controversies right now going on in Bitcoin?
There is a debate around filters and
Okay.
censorship of specific transactions. There is debate around quantum resistance and whether or not it is a threat. And there is a third debate, which is maybe not a debate, but you're asking me and I care about it. So if you ask me, it's a debate. Is the privacy on Bitcoin sufficient? Are tools like
Mm.
coin joins enough? Or do we need a better way to access L2s to build privacy there? Things like CTV or other opcodes that people have discussed adding. So I'd say those are the three. Uh, Filters, quantum resistance, and privacy. Maybe you could call the privacy one L2s or covenants, but to me, it's about privacy.
So what's the could you steel man me the argument for filters for Bitcoin transactions? Why is there this uproar that people are so concerned about? Maybe take their position and then share a little bit about your own thoughts as well.
What makes you say not pro filter?
Yeah, I'm putting you in a corner here, but uh,
Okay,
yeah.
so the steel man for the filter camp, Bitcoin was designed for monetary use case. You can put other data on Bitcoin that the Bitcoin consensus protocol itself is agnostic to this data. Your node is going to look at this data and it's going to say this means nothing to me. It's not going to say this is valid or invalid. It's going to say it means nothing. And there are different ways of putting data on chain. Some of them have, potentially consequences in terms of the usage of your nodes. If I increase the size of the UTXO set, which is kind of the global state of Bitcoin, since it doesn't have state in the same way account-based models do, but that UTXO set, how many UTXOs you have, that's kind of the state. Well, if I keep increasing that, everyone's node is going to need a little bit more CPU and a little bit more RAM to sync. And eventually, hey, are we going to make Raspberry Pis unusable? If I keep blasting out inscriptions that are increasing
And
the UTXO size, is that going to one day?
so for context, also Raspberry Pis are the nodes that like anyone is able to run.
Yeah, I think a Raspberry Pi is like the classic pleb node. They're not very expensive. They're pretty cheap. I've got a bunch in my home office that I do different little things with. They're just like fun little mini computers, but they usually have like 8 gigabytes of RAM, and they're not very robust in terms of how much computational power they have. If you are not spinning up your own node, like I'm going to install a Linux distro and I'm going to go run core. If you buy a node that's kind of ready to go, Umbrella is a company that does that. They're not these massive computer towers. They are the amount of compute that you need to run a node.
Yep.
So they're in that Raspberry Pi category for the most part.
And so if all this block space is taken up and it's getting bigger and bigger, then these more usable nodes like the Raspberry Pis aren't going to be able to support what's happening in Bitcoin, and then that's going to make the nodes or make it less decentralized because less people are running nodes. Is that a good summary of what you're saying?
But yeah, that is one of the arguments towards why we should filter out these non-monetary transactions. It's hey,
Mm.
this software we have is for money and transferring money to other people. People are using it for things that are not money, and it is affecting the experience for the people using it for money. Maybe we shouldn't have that. And that's, I think that's a legitimate argument.
And then okay, so now take the other position. Why should we have uh, more data going into a Bitcoin block?
You live by the permissionless protocol, you die by the permissionless protocol. If the transaction's valid, like, hey, if we want to talk about a fork and breaking it out, if you want to use that Bitcoin, you can. You can fork, you can do it. We can filter it out, but it's a permissionless protocol, like I want to experiment. I want to try stuff. I think it's fun. I don't want to put a Turing complete VM on it. Like I don't want to make Bitcoin EVM, but I think it's fun and creative what you can do with arbitrary data. And there's also kind of no way to stop it. I think it would be a futile effort. Uh, you can just move where you put the arbitrary data. If I'm a block builder, I can just change the order of my transactions into something arbitrary, and you can have some piece of software off chain interpret it in whatever standard you'd like. There are infinite ways to interpret arbitrary data and to change the way you write your data. Like it's not a solvable problem. It grows as you chase it down.
Yeah. Okay. That's super interesting. So people they love that Bitcoin is permissionless, but then they're trying to put permissions on the permissionless. I feel like this happens a lot in society in general. Like people get a freedom and then they're like, but like we're gonna put like a layer on top of it.
Yeah.
It's human
Yeah.
nature. So tell
We're
me what's
predictable.
happening with Bitcoin layer twos. You are like fundamentally an expert in really the Bitcoin ecosystem, the developments that are happening there. So what's going on?
Bitcoin layer 2 ecosystem has evolved a bit over the last couple of years. I'm going to back up just to give the context. A couple of years ago, ordinals come out. This is maybe the crux of the filter debate too. So we're back there. And people realize, oh, you could put an NFT on Bitcoin. You can do more interesting things on Bitcoin that many users didn't know about. And people found that very interesting. It brought some crypto users back. And then a paper comes out called BitVM. And people realize, hey, I can, in the same way I'm using arbitrary data to put an image on here, I can use arbitrary data to put a proof on here, a proof that I did some work. Zero knowledge proofs are a bit abstract. It's like, how do I prove to you I know something without telling you how I figured it out or telling you exactly what I know, which is generally abstract. But if you think of it, an example I like is if I'm colorblind and I have a red ball and a green ball and I can't tell the difference between them, but I say, then, you say, well, I know the difference between them.
Yeah.
You could prove that to me without me seeing through your eyes, without me knowing how you can tell the difference, without me knowing I'm colorblind. I put them behind my back. I say, did I switch them? And you'll say yes or no. And if we do that a million times, eventually I will believe you that like, okay, Davis knows something I don't. And that's more of like a probabilistic way to do it. But okay, you know something I don't. So if we have an execution trace of that conversation, can we put that on Bitcoin? And can we take things from outside of Bitcoin and prove them on the network itself? And, the NFTs, the JPEGs, that was a more easily understood. Oh, this is fun. But BitVM really kind of blew the roof off what people thought you could do with it. So there were already some projects. There was Lightning, there was Rootstock, there was Stacks. And now a lot of people said, well, all the cool ideas I went and built in crypto, if I could have built it on Bitcoin the first time, I would have. Now, maybe I can. And a lot of teams decided they wanted to build a Bitcoin L2. Fast forward a little bit, most of those projects have, either quietly or fabulously died or
Oh no.
rug pulled or just quieted down. There are still many teams building very legitimate projects in the Bitcoin layer space, but not nearly as many as there were a couple of years ago. So now you have, am I doing technical scaling of Bitcoin, the network, where I have the same exact trust properties of Bitcoin? Or am I doing economic scaling, where I just want to do more with BTC? And that's kind of your two camps. Economic scaling, I mean, might as well be on Solana. That's where DeFi is.
Why do you think these projects fail? Is it like a market thing or is it have to do with the founders?
There are two camps. One is, like I said, the technical scaling. That route is so hard because
Hmm.
Bitcoin script is not incredibly expressive and it's very hard to share custody. And BitVM is not as simple as some people thought when they first read the paper. We're now on the third iteration of it, and we've got garbled circuits, new constructions like clocks from the Alpin team and the Citria team, and many others working on it. They're not as straightforward. It's not really a
Wait,
solved problem.
yeah. So what does that mean? So BitVM makes it so you're able to do ZK proofs and uh, basically you can operate with Bitcoin, but then have, like you were saying with the colorblind
Yeah, I
example.
can
So
do
yeah.
something off of Bitcoin where it's cheaper or private or it's more expressive or whatever reason I want. I do something somewhere else, and then I verify that it happened by the rules on Bitcoin.
Okay. And then, so now there's been a couple iterations there, and these teams are developing clocks. And what do these clocks do that haven't hasn't existed before?
Blocks is the term that
Clocks. Okay,
Alpin
not a
uses.
clock.
uh, well, these are kind of future versions of how am I doing, how am I putting this computation on chain to verify it. There's two different reasons people would use BitVM, or people are looking into it right now. One is for bridging, and the other is for validity of transactions. Right? I want to bridge my BTC over to this L2 such that I actually own it and I can take it back whenever I want. I don't want any custodian. I don't want anyone holding the other key. I just want to be able to take it back when it's mine, which you can do with Lightning, which rocks. And you can't do with your wrapped BTCs in crypto land. Uh, I want to be able to do that. What I also want to ensure is that the sequencer is, I'm not going to buy something on said L2 and I go and I'm ready to leave. And the sequencer says, actually, we're undoing that. That didn't happen. Am I beholden to them? Like, if my Bitcoin is in motion, if I'm doing things with it, do I still have that same security as if I just moved it there? And that is the state validation step. So if you can use BitVM to, confirm, yes, you own this BTC you said you own. And also, after all of these changes, the state validation, now you own this stuff you said you own. So it's like, one, just getting the BTC there, and two, in motion. And then you can do whatever you want with it if you solve those two problems.
Okay, nice. So this is on the technical side. So it's really hard ultimately to build this and build the scaling layer where something is happening off of Bitcoin but connecting back to Bitcoin. Are we close? Like is it getting better?
It's getting better, though the problem is I see custody is very binary. You either have self custody or you do not. So
Mm,
while the technologist in me is absolutely jazzed about BitVM and I think it's super cool, the more product oriented half of me, or the user in me, says this is the same as CBBTC if I don't have self custody. If I don't actually own it, then like, why am I could just use Coinbase's wrapped Bitcoin. It, like, those incremental changes don't do a lot for me as a user. It's either I own it
yeah.
or I don't. And that's kind of the tough part. So like, you have incremental changes. We're pushing towards, like, BitVM is absolutely a better custodial model, but it's not 100%. So in my eyes as a user and many other people's eyes, like, it's you are 0 or you are 100. Like, 90% doesn't mean you're 100. It means you're 0. You are all or nothing. So that is the tough part.
Do you think that's what's stopping adoption? Like it's almost if you have full custody, then it's a switch that's flipped, or
It's a
or
big
is it
custody trade-off.
okay?
Sorry, custody trade. It's a big UX trade-off with that custody.
Yeah.
So there are systems where you can have your custodial BTC, you have your unilateral exits, which is your self custody. You have that in Spark, which is a state chain system. You have that in Lightning, which is a state channel system, and you're using Bitcoin, and you're
All good. Coffee sip intermission.
oh yeah, uh, and you have, as well as that, archetype systems like Arcade, and
Mhm.
you don't have the same UX you have in crypto. Part of that is, okay, I have like a 10-year head start. If I'm building on EVM, I can fork stuff. I got wallets, I got stable coins, I got oracles. They're all ready to go.
Yep.
These are solved problems. And there's a great open source ethos in crypto. So that's really nice. You have this nice UX. You don't have as nice of a UX when you're using a more Bitcoin like system because you don't have global state. UTXOs are very elegant, but I don't think they're really how people work mentally. And we work more like an account based model, which is the accounting system on Ethereum for
Wait,
say.
can you describe that as well? Because it took me a long time to understand the difference between a UTXO model and account based. Also, even just the definitions of the names.
Yeah, so these are both accounting models. Like, how do I keep track of everything? And the account-based model is where I'll start. This is like the EVM for you because it's a little more intuitive. It's we each have a bank account. If I want to send you dollars, if I want to send you some money, we're going to say Red's bank account minus $10, Davis's bank account plus $10. That's how it's going to work.
Yep.
Because we have this big state tree. It's not really looking like a tree, but the data structure is called a tree. So
Okay.
state tree. And you have all these little branches that come down to the bottom. And, here it says, it's titled Red, and it says he has, $75 and he's got, 200 dog coins, and he's got all these NFTs, and it's going to have Davis, and it's going to say everything you have, and there's going to be a smart contract. Here's an AMM, and it's going to say Davis has a position in here for this much, and there's this much, and all of the kind of history of everyone who's in there. And we think of things that way generally as people. This is your global state. It's a little bit different if you're dealing with a UTXO. I have a $20 bill and I want to pay you. What I need to do to pay you $7 is I need to destroy this $20 bill. It's gone. And I create a $7 bill and a $13 bill. And I give you the $7 and I keep the $13 bill. And a UTXO is like this continual process of creation and destruction where it's not, the global state is not everybody's name and then the list of what they have. The global state is the stuff that they have. So the $13 UTXO, it just says my name on it. It says Red. So then if I go to spend it, it'll check who's the owner of this. Oh, Red's the owner. Red's signed this transaction. Yeah, he could spend it. You can destroy it, do whatever you want, as long as what goes in is what comes out. If $20 went in, $20 has to come out. So it's more of like a pool of money with people's names written on it, and you're going to destroy it and create an equivalent version of however many pieces you want, which is why the UTXO state can bloat. It can increase if I'm making a bunch of little UTXOs. If I turn my $20 bill into 2,000 1-cent bills,
Yep.
the state is bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like how state bloat works in there. I hope that analogy works a bit, but it kind of shows the difference of it's kind of like physical money to digital money is mentally how those models work.
Okay. Got it. So I guess jumping back now to the L2 ecosystem. So technically, it's really challenging, and
Mhm.
that's been a reason why it hasn't taken off. There's no full custody that's happening, and that could be sort of like a binary switch. If you get full custody and also good UI. You also have one other thing that you mentioned, which was I believe the scaling side, or
Economic
was that
scaling.
economics? Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the reason I split them into two sections is because I think many people are building on Bitcoin for different reasons. And I also think of
Be
Bitcoin as
rich.
two distinct technologies, right? It's like BTC the asset or Bitcoin the network. A lot of
Yeah.
people like those different things for different reasons. So if you like Bitcoin the network, you want Bitcoin's exact security. You don't want something like it. You want the exact security. You need that self custody. You need that state validation. If all you like is BTC the asset, you're like, hey, I like how this thing's built. I like its 21 million supply cap. I like its issuance rate. This is good hard money. This is cool, and I want to do more stuff with it than just pay people. I want to use it in all these yield systems like Morpho. I want to hold it in my 401k. Economic scaling, BlackRock's iShares, Coinbase's CBBTC, wrapped BTC on Ethereum, anything going on in Solana, all of that's economic scaling. It's all in the same category to me. eCash is like this too, because eCash is non-custodial. But unlike BlackRock, you have so much flexibility on what you might do with an eCash system. And you still get some of the crypto ethos if you're using wrapped BTC, on Ethereum or Solana. So it's not the same as being on Bitcoin the network, but you have the exposure to BTC the asset. And that's a completely different motivation for many people, which is why we have such heterogeneous architectures in Bitcoin L2s.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. So that makes sense. Um, I guess what's next for Bitcoin then? Like what do you see happening in the future?
Next for Bitcoin, I think we will see more of crypto denominated in BTC. There are many assets that people consider money in crypto, usually the gas token of your popular networks, and I don't think they're money. I
Okay.
think if you have AMM pools, the way that people like to pair, their speculation tokens and AMM pools with stable coins, just about on every network. Once you see a good stable coin get increased, DeFi TVL goes through the roof because now there's a good stable pair. But that's not being done with BTC as much. I think we'll see more of it in there. I think we'll see it become the financial layer of crypto. Um,
Okay.
Ideally,
Wait. I
but
mean,
very
what does that mean?
financial layer is in you go on any network, every AMM pool on Solana, it's some token paired with Sol or some token paired with USDC. I think we'll see a lot more of some token paired with a wrapped BTC. I think we'll see a lot more of get paid in BTC for your yield, even when you're dealing with other assets. It's the same reason people want stable coins. They want a better asset. I think for the same reason, we are going to trend more towards BTC as that stable asset instead of the dollar. I don't see the dollar getting any better in terms of debasement.
So that's really cool. So basically, you'll have like, let's just say hype to BTC as the stable pair, and like that's what people are going to value their hype on, not like the hype to USDC pairing.
Yeah, I think other crypto ecosystems begin to recognize BTC as the real money, not the native gas token of whatever network you're on.
Okay, that's super cool. So is that so how does this like actually play out? Give me like is this like 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? What's our timeline looking like? And should I
I'll
buy
give it a
Bitcoin?
cycle. I'll give it a cycle, and that's how much time it's going to take for the slow bleed of assets that call themselves money to, and then the people that use them to come to terms with these are not money.
Yeah,
And that doesn't mean I don't like Solana or Ethereum or Base or other networks. I love using these tools. They're just different things. I like
yeah,
them for different reasons than I like BTC.
yeah. So a cycle, like what does that look like timeline wise? Because crypto a cycle could be like 4 months.
Oh, I'm calling a cycle like 4 years. I'm saying
Or
like like the bigger cycle.
okay, the bigger macro cycle, the
We might
halving
even
cycle.
see BTC take this role on in TradFi,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that would be effectively the same thing. I don't think that's happening that soon, or that's a
yeah.
loftier idea, but that would effectively be the same thing if TradFi starts pricing things in BTC instead of USD. That sounds crazy in TradFi, but I don't think that sounds very crazy in crypto.
I think that's like one of the coolest things that has been a phase shift for me since working in crypto is actually denominating things not in dollars. It's like a weird like mental calculus that you have to do, and you start denominating things in Bitcoin or in Ethereum, and then it just like kind of clicks. You're like, oh shit, like this is super powerful. One problem though right now is that it's super volatile, right? Like in the last couple days. The price has swung by 10% in either direction, right? And that's relative to the dollar. Obviously, it's not an issue if everything's based in valued in Bitcoin, but still currently where you have to have dollar liquidity in order to buy a physical good or buy a service or buy labor, you can't do that. So I'm curious, like, what's going to change that? Is it just that Bitcoin's market cap needs to get to a sufficient level where it's like really hard to move the price, or what do you think like really fundamentally changes that?
It's already becoming more stable, I'd say, over the years. Not stable. You have some issues there. I haven't even thought about relative to its market cap, how stable is BTC compared to the dollar.
Hmm.
The tough thing with when I first try to Bitcoin pill friends or other Americans, the issue is that like $1 always equals $1. It doesn't fluctuate. It's very unintuitive. Though if you talk to a German friend and you explain how currency moves in value, it might be more intuitive. Because if I
Yep.
go to buy a gallon of milk and the price is this much in euros and that much in francs, and then I go tomorrow and it's the same in euros, but francs changed, then like, oh, did euros go up or did francs go down? Did euros and milk go up and francs went down? Like, which is more realistic? Like, when you have more variables, you actually, intuitively understand that 1.0 of your fiat currency is not this immovable concept. It is relative to everything else. And that's maybe the issue with talking about volatility with Americans is
Yep.
that they don't understand the dollar can change in value.
Yeah.
It's everything got more expensive. No, the dollar's worth less.
Yeah, exactly. Well, what do you think about like a flat coin? I know that's something that Brian Armstrong is touted as like, oh, this would be like a really cool thing to be built. So for context and definition, it's like a basket of goods effectively that tries to uh, price against inflation and stay like relatively stable. Or do you think that's just Bitcoin?
CPI coin.
Yeah.
I think it'd be a fun experiment. I'd love to see what happens with it, but simple solutions work best. There seems to be a lot of management involved in a system like that. How are you deciding what goods are in? How are you deciding how the goods are weighted? If you look
Yeah.
at CPI and you say, oh, things got cheaper because electronics got cheaper, it's like, well, are we weighting this too much now? And I think there'd be a lot of management in a in an experiment like that. I think it'd be worth doing, but I don't know if I'd sell my
Yeah.
Bitcoin for it.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. Stay in Bitcoin. So I guess I wanted to touch on one last thing, and we're going to go on a super big tangent here. But talk to me about urbanization and city planning. Like what's the problem
Oof.
right now, and what does the future look like?
All right, buckle up. We're pivoting. I'm very radicalized about urban design and how cities are built.
Mm,
Okay, so you don't have a lot of mixed use walkable cities in the US. The places you do have are generally very old, or they are places that most people live temporarily, like a college campus, or you go to Disney World and you don't need a car to get around. I love I love driving. It's a good time. I love driving out into the mountains here in Colorado, and I love being able to go camping, go wherever you want. But infrastructure that needs a car is a blight. It is like infrastructure dependent, car centric infrastructure that depends on cars is like cancerous to society. If you're too young to drive, or you're too old to drive, or you cannot drive for some other reason, you can no longer participate in society. How are
yep.
you gonna, get to a job? And like, sure, you could have a remote job, but we all need to get out in the world. How are you gonna go get groceries unless your kid picks you up to come drive you there? How are you gonna go anywhere? And that is just degenerative for your brain. I think that is why we have an increase in things like Alzheimer's is if you're old and you can't go anywhere, like how are you participating in anything about society? I think it's a financial strain. It is incredibly antisocial. I love to walk and bike around town because of the serendipity of I might run into someone that I know. I might meet someone new. It it's like that Kurt Vonnegut quote where he's talking about someone tells him it's inefficient to go to the grocery store or 2 to 3 times a week and do small trips. Like, and today's equivalent is you should get all your groceries door dashed if you make more than X dollars an hour because it's more efficient. It's like, well, maybe I want the chance of something serendipitous happening. I need these little micro interactions with strangers throughout my day. Otherwise, you're going to be online all day. And evolution has not caught up to that. Like, that is,
Yeah,
we're going
for
through
sure.
like a massive gene pool bottleneck of people that can't moderate their internet time. And like, if you can't self-moderate the way you use the internet and all of these cool new tools we have, like you're out of the gene pool. That's what's going to happen because that's what birth rates drop.
So okay,
And yeah, it's a social thing.
I'm gonna see if I can tie this back into crypto to a degree. So hear me
Let's
out.
do it.
We're gonna try with urban design and crypto at large. If you are um, creating a framework for thinking from first principles and designing either a city or a project, how do you start from first principles and build the system? How would you go about like really like thinking through these problems?
You'd want to write down all your prior assumptions, your prior knowledge, your prior understandings, and question them. So you can see if they hold up. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. If you're asking, hey, why do we all live in car centric cities? I can't really walk anywhere. There's not like or walking anywhere. Like people don't walk or bike around town. Why do they do that? Maybe it's because it's not a nice experience. Maybe because there are zoning laws all over most of North America that stop you from building mixed use development. If I can't go to the corner store, if I have to get in the car anyway, I'll just go to Walmart, and then you have less local businesses. So it's, you know, kind of questioning we all build assumptions on why things are the way they are subconsciously. You kind of have to pull all of that subconscious stuff to the front and question it. If you ask, why is everyone using the dollar? Is it the only option? Is the dollar the way it exists now the only option? Maybe do a little research. Well, it used to be backed by gold. There are other countries that are using the dollar. Why don't they use their own currency? The inflation. Well, they're using the dollar, so the dollar doesn't inflate. No, maybe it's just the least bad in that sense. Uh, you kind of want to ask those questions. Why does everything turn into delegation once you're past a few hundred people? What is the reason for that? Is that a reason we can fix? Is it, the fickleness of human trust? Is it a bandwidth thing? So it's, yeah, break it down into all the little subconscious choices and truths you told yourself and say, was that the convenient thing that I needed to abstract in order to, work within this system? Or did I get it right the first time? Was it actually something else?
I really like that. I feel like that's kind of like the Feynman technique that he's famous for. I'm gonna absolutely butcher what it is, but it's basically just like questioning things over and over again until you get down to the fundamental root. Um, and that's how I don't know if you know this, but that's how Richard Feynman came up with the Feynman equations. Is he kept questioning the assumptions? He's like about the proofs he was using for um, ultimately what the Feynman equations solve. I'm not even going to try to explain that. But he questioned it so much so that he found out that like one of the like standard, well recognized proofs in physics was wrong, and like it had like a fundamental thing wrong that everyone else took for granted, and then that enabled him to make his breakthrough. Um, so yeah, so I think tying that back to what you were saying is like really question your priors, question like what you're thinking, and distill it down to first principles.
Yeah, I love that take on it. I try to do that with my own interests and say, like, what's the common denominator between why I like the things that I like? Is it like this agentic mode, like this state of mind that I'm in when doing it? Like why do you enjoy Sudokus or chess or any game you play? Any of those things. Is there something, maybe not in the functionality of what you're doing, but in the way you feel when you're doing it that makes you, have some sort of pattern in your interests?
Okay, I have a fun one today that I've got to ask you. This was a shower thought of
Yeah.
mine. Uh, do like why do and I'm not picking on females here, but why do girls like the color pink? Like why is that a thing? Because you ask a lot of girls what their favorite color is, they'll say it's pink. Is it a societal thing? Like do they like the color pink because society says they should like the color pink, or is there actually something in genetics that's like, oh, there's a predisposition to liking this color? Like why do genders like like things separately? Like, why are there these stereotypes? Is that societal? Is it genetic? Like, what's going on?
I do not think everything is societal. I think a lot of people think like, oh, everything's societal. Absolutely not. Like virtually all violent crime anywhere is men. Like there
Yeah,
are differences.
like,
Like
we'll take it. I'm happy
differences
with that.
exist. As far as colors, I know I'll butcher this, but I'm going to regurgitate it a bit. I read something about how food branding often trends towards the color red because it triggers specific feelings in us. Colors have different outcomes on people that are pretty predictable. It's not like regional or ethnic or this. It's people look at the color red and it is more likely to make you hungry, is what some research has suggested. Why are most food brands using a red colorway? There has to be something to that, and that is my armchair human behavior psychologist, evolutionist reason for maybe a bit of both. There's got to be some nature in there, that there's something about the color pink that resonates more
Okay.
with women than men. That's
We'll,
my
uh,
guess.
we'll have to dig more. I'll get back. So one last thing as we're wrapping up here, I want to leave our listeners with uh, one thing that you told me right at the beginning of our call that I thought was super fun, and it had to do with modern day handshake. So I'll leave you with that. Can you explain that?
Okay. First, shout out Charlie Spears from Blockspace because I got this idea from him. And it is essentially that having a good camera and a good mic is the modern day version of wearing a nice suit and having a good handshake. It is your first impression in the digital era where everything's over a Zoom call.
Yeah, we'll leave it right there. So get a good mic, get a good camera, because yeah, it honestly, I've never really thought about that, but it is just a good first
Yeah.
impression.
Look
It sets
sharp
you
online.
apart. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, Red, this was super fun. Thank you for jumping on, and yeah, we'll have to chat again. So that's the pod.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.